and then I'll start.
Okay. So welcome everybody. This is our collab session focusing on test prep. And tonight we have Bobby Hood coming and talking to us about how to improve your test prep strategies and really kind of eke out those last little improvements, particularly for rising seniors. So we're excited to have Bobby tonight, and I'm going to turn it over so he can tell us more about his experience.
Wonderful. So thank you, Debbie. I'm really happy to be here tonight. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, wonderful. So, so I am here tonight to be a resource and answer questions about, this topic of what to do as you approach senior year. I'm going to just speak for a moment about, my history so you know who I am. But I am here to answer your questions. So I'd love it if anybody types questions in the chat window as they come up, and we would all love to address them. So my name is Bobby Hood. I live in Austin, Texas. A long time ago, I guess late 1980s, I graduated high school in 1989. I needed to take the PSAT and SAT just like everybody else, and I used the book called Cracking the SAT from the Princeton Review, and I didn't go to a class or do any tutoring. I just used this book, and that book really, really worked for me. And I ended up getting an almost perfect score on the SAT. I got a 1590, 800 math, 790 verbal. And then I thought, well, I should, while I was working on that, I also worked on the ACT. So I got the book Cracking the ACT, and I used that and got a 35 on the ACT. And so because of that preparation I got from those books, I was able to become a National Merit finalist, National Merit Scholar, get a full scholarship to attend college. I went to college and ended up majoring in accounting, getting a BBA, worked for 2 years as a CPA for Pricewaterhouse, which is now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I had the intention the whole time of becoming an attorney, or really my intention was to become a law professor. So I decided to go to law school, thought about business school, so I used the Cracking the GMAT book and the Cracking the LSAT book, and I just kept taking standardized tests, and I did really well in all of them, and ended up getting a full scholarship to go to law school at the University of Texas. And then I practiced law for 10 years in Dallas, and I specialized in financial law, and I worked on the financings of things like these big highways in Texas and the Dallas Cowboys football stadium and the Yankees baseball stadium and the Jets Giants stadium. So I got to work on really exciting stuff. But as everybody might remember, right around 2008 or so, the financial markets cratered worldwide, and I suddenly had no clients. And also, I never really enjoyed being an attorney. And at that point, I thought, I want to do something that is more rewarding. And took me a little while to find it. I realized that being a tutor is kind of coming back around. My original plan was to be a professor. I kind of lost track of that and became an attorney, and so now I've been doing this for almost 8 years, and because I'm sort of doing it full time and take it very seriously, I'm different from a lot of the tutors you might encounter who are just sort of making side money while they're in college or in graduate school, right? Helping people for the ACT or SAT. This is my full-time thing. It's what I do. I help people for the SAT and the ACT. I also tutor for the graduate tests, the LSAT, the GMAT, the GRE, and the MCAT, but that's separate from what our conversation is about here. So I tutor 60 to 100 students a year, probably. I have now at this point a great deal of experience working with students of all types. I primarily work with students who score in the above average range without prep, trying to get to the absolute highest ranges. That's generally what I do, and my focus is trying to be super efficient instead of doing this thing where it takes 24 hours of tutoring and you spend months and months. I try to spend 3 to 5 or 6, or when it's really long, maybe 10 hours of tutoring with the student, and get them as quickly as possible to the scores that they want. And so that's what I do, and I work all online, so my students are all over the country, and I've worked with some students that I was introduced to through the Paying for College 101 and through the the programs we did before. So I'm here today to talk about how to decide whether you should quickly try to change your score at the last minute, whether you should take these subject tests, that sort of thing, as you are a rising junior joining school. So that's why I'm here, and I'm ready to talk about those things, but I'm going to turn it back over now to Debbie so you can tell me how you'd like to proceed, what sort of, where we'd like to start, and kind of make a conversation out of it.
Sure. Well, let me just say hi to everybody again.
Yeah.
And this is okay. Rose, I'm saying hi. I don't know if you can hear and see us, but anybody, if they want to, they can check their video and, come and show their face, which is great. It's nice to see everybody and meet everybody. And it's probably best, if you can, to keep your mic muted. And those two icons are in the bottom left corner. There's a little camera and a little mic. And just keep it muted until you have a question. And if you have a question, unmute it and ask us. Or you can type a question in the chat box, which, if it's not already popped up for you, it is one of those icons again at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, the fourth icon in, which is a little blue bubble. So just a little housekeeping. But so Bobby, why don't you just tell us a little bit about how a student would evaluate whether or not they should, go again to try and take the test and do better. And is it based on how many times they've already taken the test?
Certainly, yeah. So here's the way you want to think about this stuff, right? When you go to high school for all these years and you spend all these hours and hours and months and years working on building a transcript that looks good to a college, establishing a GPA, and all of these things. And when you're doing that, you get a set of grades and a transcript that reflects the amount of effort you've put in and all of the things that you've learned, right, throughout school. And so if, say, you have a transcript that has all A's on it or A's and some B's on it, then that would reflect that you have mastered a whole lot of subjects, right? And so then if you go and you take the SAT or the ACT, and let's say you had a transcript that had mostly A's or A's and B's on it, but if you take the ACT or the SAT and you get a score that's right in the median, the 50th percentile, well, that score does not reflect what your potential is. It does not reflect the actual achievement that you've done so far in school, right? And so your goal should be to have an SAT or ACT score that matches to the achievement that you have done in school, that reflects you. Or perhaps if you feel like your transcript doesn't completely reflect your achievement and your mastery, for instance, if you had a bad year, or you had things happen in your personal life, a family member was sick or something like that, so you had a bad year that brings your GPA down, you can have an SAT score or an ACT score that says, oh, I'm actually in the top 10th percentile. I'm at the 90th percentile, the 95th percentile. And so you want a score that reflects that. So question number one is, do you have a score that matches or exceeds the potential you have shown through your academic achievement in your transcript? And if you don't, then that means that probably you just have not, you may have, and I've encountered some students, and I'll tell a story very quickly in a minute. You might have done some preparation. You might have done a lot of preparation previously for the ACT or the SAT and still not gotten the score that matches what you should get. And I will very quickly tell you this story. I had a student who his mother called me like 6 days, I believe, 6 days before the July ACT this summer, so just 2 months ago, or a month and a half ago. And her son had, during his junior year, had done 50 hours, that's 50 hours, of one-on-one individual tutoring for the ACT. He had begun with a cold score of a 28. No prep, he got a 28. He needed a 30 in order to be admitted to the schools that he was looking to. And he had done 50 hours of tutoring, and his score had gone down to a 26. And if you can imagine how angry I was on the phone hearing that this poor family had been, as far as I'm concerned, basically victimized, and this poor son had just wasted so much of his life. And that doesn't mean that anybody was not doing what they were supposed to do. It's just somebody was being inefficient there, and they weren't adjusting things the way they should have been adjusted. And she said, my son is this football star. He's a great achiever. He is upstairs crying in his room right now because he's not going to be able to go and get the finance degree at the, kind of low first-tier school that he wants to go to. And I said, can you get him on the phone? And she got him on the phone, and I said, are you willing to spend 6 days and really work on this and just believe me and try some stuff? And he said, sure. And we tried it out, and in 6 days, we did 2.75 hours of work in 3 sessions. So little 1 hour, 45-minute session, a 45-minute session, another 45-minute session, an hour-long session. And he ended up getting a 31 on the ACT 6 days later. And that, of course, is an unusual story. It's probably the best quick success story I've ever had. But that, in a nutshell, is what I'm doing, which is there are ways to just simply notice patterns of the test. This kind of story happens for students who did learn and master a bunch of concepts, and then they're not getting the score that reflects that, right? Now, if a student has serious, math difficulties or difficulties with, reading comprehension, things like that, they're not going to see an enormous jump like that, perhaps in that short of a time. But the point is, if their score isn't matching, that means something has been a disconnect somewhere, and it can be done with the right efficient sort of tutoring, right? So the point I'm making is, if you feel like it is there, I mean, certainly I would be happy to talk to anybody about it, about trying to do a quick turnaround. And let's talk just specifically, I think the question is, should we, start doing this right now or not, right? I have students right now, I have 4 students who just started who are about to take the SAT the 25th, which is a week from Saturday. I have some of them started last week. So I'm doing a lot of 2-week turnarounds with some students right now. And then I've also got students that are working toward the ACT on the 8th of September, right? If you're an incoming senior, it's a quick turnaround. It's something that you would only want to do in certain circumstances, which is, that you have a mismatch between your score and your performance, or your mastery level. And you've got the time to spend some time working on it. And a specific goal that you're trying to achieve that is, a few points in a certain direction. The way you can find that out is, and I think, Debbie, you can confirm this for me, but if you have a college that you really want to go to, and the student gets on the phone with that college and says, I really want to go, I'm an incoming senior, I'm filling out my application for you, here's my scores. Tell me, is there a number that I need where you would feel more comfortable? And many, many schools will say, well, if you had this number, you could feel really comfortable. And also, a lot of schools will say, if you have this number, we can probably find some scholarship money for you, right? A lot of what I get is incoming seniors or parents say, well, okay, we know we're going to get into X school, but they said if we get a 30 on the ACT, we're going to get a $90,000 scholarship. So knowing that, and we've got a 27 right now, they're willing to invest $1,000 or $1,500 in some tutoring because the risk-reward benefit ratio there is worth it. So I feel like that's an extremely long answer to your question, but did I answer all of that question, Debbie, or is there more there that I kind of went off track?
I guess my only other part of that question is, a student could be just slightly away from a certain goal that they want, whether it's,
Sure.
for getting into certain types of schools or getting money. And what if they've already taken this 4 times and they just can't seem to, bump themselves up? Do you think
Yeah,
it's still worth it, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that. And Michelle, I also see that you you mentioned, the question about specific strategies as well. And so the only reason, if you've taken this test several times, right, a conversation I often have with parents when they start up is that this whole process, the idea of both the college admissions process and the SAT, ACT process, it is a balance between time available, right, which students have very little of, and burnout levels, right? There is a point at which a student, no matter how wonderful and motivated and well-meaning everyone is, no matter how motivated you are, there is a point you come to where you say, Mom, Dad, I can't do this anymore with this test. I can't work on these essays anymore. I can't whatever it is anymore. And I can't go visit any more colleges, whatever it is. You got to get done before you hit the burnout point, right? So now, if you've taken this test 4 times or whatever, there is no reason to take it again unless you have changed something, right? If you change something about what you're doing, then that's a reason to take it. And there is no reason you should ever walk in to take a test unless you have a really, really good idea what score is going to come out when you take it, right? And if you, the way I work with students at least, they take a test, I review it with them, we review whatever they missed and whatever they had trouble with, I discuss specific strategies for those questions, they go take another practice section or another full practice test, and then once you get the same score a few times, you either say, okay, I'm done, or we need to change something to keep moving up higher. But once you get it, if you get the same score twice or 3 times and you like that score, now you're ready to go take the test. Now, of course, anyone can always have a bad day, right? You can feel sick, you can be distracted, it can be too cold, you can stay up really late the night before. So you always need to keep in mind that any one test day can be bad for any reason, but that the only way to guard against that is to have prepared and gotten the same score multiple times on the practice test. And that's it. So that's the way to decide if you have changed something about how you're preparing, right? And the thing is, so many people think, and it's kind of how many of us our age grew up, many people think that the way to do better on these tests is to do hundreds of practice questions. Many parents say, okay, now I'm going to tell my student to do hundreds of practice questions in between the sessions. And I say, you absolutely must not do that, right? Because if you are just simply doing practice questions without knowing patterns and strategies, you are simply reinforcing bad patterns and strategies and not helping yourself at all and accelerating yourself right up to that burnout wall where you're going to be done and there's nothing else that can be done, right? So to talk briefly about specific strategies, Michelle, because you had asked about that. So
yeah, thank you.
Certainly, I mean, I do believe that the Princeton Reviews, cracking the SAT book and cracking the ACT book, that they are very, very good products. I have loved them since I was a kid. I love them now. I think they are very, very good, and I do recommend them. If a student were to do nothing else, I would say read those books, right, and apply the strategies that are in there. I also imagine that other books like Kaplan's books and things like that are also good. I just happen to have grown up with those books, and I did teach for Princeton Review for a number of years. Now I am an independent on my own. Well, I'm an independent, and I work with Noodle Pros, which is a group of high-caliber, top-shelf tutors all over the nation. But I am no longer affiliated with the Princeton Review. That said, with respect to strategies, the way I work with students and tell them about this is that with reading comprehension, the test is mostly just a big word search puzzle, as in the question they ask a question, it has words in the question that you locate in the passage and find them and point at them with your finger, and the answer to the question generally is going to be in a window of about 10 lines, 5 lines up and down, often 3 or 4 or 5 lines up or down. That right there, that one sentence is one of the biggest keys to test preparation, and really is not something I should even say out loud, because people should have to be tutoring with me just to hear that. That's the most important thing. It is a word search puzzle, and you need to stop thinking so much and start looking for things and pointing with your finger to match the wording and the paraphrasing of the answers. It's not about thinking. With the grammar side of the test, which on the SAT is writing and language, and on the ACT is called English test, those tests are basically the same. Those tests are about half a grammar test, and the trick with them is that we all know lots of things that we think are grammar rules, or that might be grammar rules, or that might be just complete myths, right? Like the not ending a sentence with a preposition. That is not where it's at, right? That you can do that. You can end sentences with prepositions. But the point is, on the SAT and ACT, they only test like 6 grammar rules, and they are the most obvious ones that everyone can agree on. They test subject-verb agreement. They test pronoun rules. They test that commas generally should only be used to set off unnecessary ideas. They test complete sentences, run-ons, and fragments. And then the rest of the test is questions, and you have to follow the instructions of the question. If it says, which answer choice emphasizes the vibrancy of this dance troupe, you pick the answer that is a vibrant word. That's it. If it says, which sentence is the best transition from the previous paragraph to this paragraph, you pick the sentence that has a word that matches something from the previous paragraph and a word that matches something from this paragraph. You do exactly what it says, and you ignore all the other stuff that you think are grammar rules. That's all you need to know, and the problem is you need to know the patterns of this test, and the way to know the patterns of the test is to have looked at 20 of them in detail, right? Once you've done that, you know exactly how this test works, because it's the exact same thing over and over and over, right? And then with respect to math, it really is a gigantic part of math is that they are trying to get students to waste their time doing too much math. They are trying to get students who are currently taking calculus or pre-cal to go and use a bunch of pre-cal methods to solve a thing that can be solved in 20 seconds with stuff from a class 3 years ago, from geometry class, right? And there are very simple strategies. You can get every single one of them from the Cracking the SAT book that will absolutely, like, every student should either be tutoring or should read the math techniques from the Princeton Review's Cracking the SAT book. And if they do exactly what that book suggests, they will do so much better on the math section. And that's it. It is a straightforward process. And so just to sum up the very long statement I just made, I will happily answer questions from anybody, both here and you can email me. I put my website in the chat window. It has a contact form there. You can email me questions. I'm not going to charge you money for emailing me to ask me questions. You can work with me as a tutor if you want, but I would say if a student is motivated and they go work through at least the math portion of the Cracking the SAT book or the Cracking the ACT book, they should see some direct improvement on their math score very quickly. That's it. So yeah, Debbie, does that help respond? I know I'm taking forever to answer some of your questions.
No, that's okay. And the strategies that you kind of outlined, do you think that they apply regardless of whether somebody's focusing on the SAT or the ACT?
So yes, what I just described, the things I said about reading comprehension apply to both. There are some differences between the SAT and ACT that slightly modify that. Like, for instance, at the SAT, the questions are in order to where they appear. But the ACT, they're more randomized, so you have to do more searching on the ACT. The SAT, they're in order. But yeah, that applies. The English test is the same thing. The English test and the writing and language test from the SAT and ACT are identical to each other. And math, they're close enough to identical. They have certain different types of questions, but the strategies are 100% the same. The ACT does include a science section, the key to the science section is to treat it exactly like it's the reading section and just do the exact same thing I just said, which is answer exactly what the question says, go word match, find things, point your finger at them, and prove the answer by pointing at it. And
so students, for the science section, they shouldn't be nervous, like, I don't remember what a molecule is, or,
It has, yeah. Out of the 40 questions in the ACT science section, 3 out of the 40 require a tiny amount of outside science knowledge. But that outside knowledge is generally something like knowing that mammals have live babies, or that the reverse of like that the process of going from liquid to solid is called melting, or is called freezing, and that the reverse of that from going solid to liquid is called melting. Like, that's the typical kind of thing. So no, you don't need to know any science at all. I think I did see in the past year you needed to kind of one question you needed to sort of understand about like the recessive and dominant traits in genes or something, which I barely remember, but I think is usually pretty basic to high school students. They learned that, but other than that, if you literally didn't know those 3, you'd only miss 3 questions. The rest of it, everything can be answered by looking and pointing at stuff that is given to you right there on the page. So yeah, these tests have nothing to do with anything you learned except a few basic grammar rules, 3 basic science questions out of 40, and knowing how to do algebra and geometry. You have to know those rules, and that's it. That is all you actually need to know on that test.
Okay. Great. I hate to say, I think Christina? Yes. Are you typing? If you're typing, do you mind just muting your mic, because it comes up as background
noise. It sounds like somebody's playing the drums.
No, that's me. That's me. I'm typing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going to mute myself.
Hi.
Yeah, mute yourself while you're typing.
I saw you looking down, so I thought maybe you were typing. Sorry about that. So the one other thing I thought would be interesting for you to talk about, and I remember this from our other conversation, and there might be, and people want to let us know, there might be people that are part of the conversation tonight who don't have a senior yet. They still might have a student in 11th grade. And I kind of remember you emphasizing that sometimes you turn students away and say, go back and work on your fundamentals, and then come, and then we'll work together.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that's to go, like, yeah, to tie that into what I was saying earlier, right? The idea is to maximize what you know, right? And the way I say this is basically, based on your achievement in school, the math you've learned, there are questions you're supposed to get right, and there are questions you're supposed to miss, right? If you haven't taken Algebra 2 yet, then you're supposed to miss a certain number of questions because they are Algebra 2 level questions, right? So you need to, so what I do is help students maximize the things they actually know. If a student comes to me and they have difficulty adding fractions together or manipulating a basic algebra equation, like if solving 3x plus 5 equals 10 is, if that's difficult to solve, then that student, I'm going to say, go and spend some time on the Khan Academy website. It's free, doing those introductory, like pre-algebra type lessons for a couple of weeks so that you're back familiar with that. Because otherwise you're paying, a high-end tutor to do something that can be done for free on a website, right? So with respect to getting back, like if a student says, I don't remember anything about geometry, right? So if literally a student says, I can't calculate the area of a rectangle or a circle, then that student should go to Khan Academy or whatever other free website you want, and go do some remedial geometry stuff. Once they've done that, I mean, this is a 2-week, 3-week thing, right? Then they should come back and be ready to start. And that's just simply because I don't have interest in having people spend thousands and thousands of dollars for me to teach something that you can learn from a website. That's as much as that, I guess, would be financially beneficial to me. And there are people who've offered to do that. That's not what I want to be doing. I want to be helping students, get massive improvements on the test quickly, not getting up to the point to where they're ready for that. So I don't want to spend people's money badly. And so that's it. When there are free resources out there that will accomplish the goal, that's it. The problem is that Khan Academy advertises itself as a good resource for learning how to take the SAT, and it very much is not that. It does not teach any strategy whatsoever. What it does is teaches you that long, slow way of doing the problem that's going to run you out of time with over-elaborate explanations that, and this is what really frustrates me about a lot of test prep. You see this more in the graduate level with the LSAT and the GMAT, but you have these test prep books that effectively just say the way to do these tests is to be really smart and think really hard about things, right? Well, that is not helpful advice, right? And that's kind of what Khan Academy's advice is: know every single kind of math perfectly and do it right, right? Whereas if you know the patterns of the test and you use the tricks, the strategies described in the Princeton Review Book and many others, the primary strategy for math being, of course, don't do any of the algebra on the test. Simply just every time there's a variable, plug in a number instead and do arithmetic instead of algebra. It's the #1 primary strategy in all of test prep, invented by John Katzman in the 1980s. It was the whole basis of Princeton Review, and any reputable tutor or materials should be teaching plugging in to avoid algebra. That's the key strategy, and Khan Academy never mentions anything like that, and that's the primary thing that most students need, even if they don't think so. If that makes sense.
That's interesting. So, I personally, I haven't delved into Khan Academy, so it's interesting to hear your analysis of it because it is promoted so heavily, obviously, by the College Board.
Yeah, Khan Academy itself is a amazing, wonderful, enormous boon to humanity. I mean, what they initially created, a thing that teaches all of basically science, is amazing, and they're teaching all of basically math is amazing, and now they have pretty much everything. Almost all the courses you need in the world, they're on there. That's where you learn the content. If you need to learn content, go to Khan Academy. They then partnered with College Board for this thing about strategy. They are not a strategy test prep company. That is not what they do, and there is no strategy or test prep whatsoever in their material, right? So that's interesting.
So tell us about the ACT Academy.
Say that? Oh.
The ACT Academy?
So Joanne, is ACT Academy this new thing where tutors are getting certified to become ACT tutors, I think, or something?
No, I think it's more, ACT was following what College Board did, so it's an online source. I haven't delved into it too much, and I wasn't sure if you have.
Oh, okay. It is a source for free practice, right. Excellent source for practice questions, right? I absolutely, I insist to all of my students, they must only ever practice on actual SAT questions and actual ACT questions. And the source for actual SAT questions is directly from College Board. There are 8 practice tests, but tests 1 through 4 are not actual administered SATs. So tests 1 through 4 are not things you should use to practice on. Tests 5 through 8 are the only 4 officially released practice tests that were real SATs. Those are the first 4 things that students should practice on. And then after that, there are other tests that the SAT, that College Board releases as question and answer service. Like a student can get a copy of their test, and then some students put them out on the internet, so you can find them on Reddit or something. So you can find about 8 more real SATs there. Khan Academy's questions are not written by College Board. They're not written by ETS. And so I don't send my students to practice SAT questions on Khan Academy, but I do have them learn any math they need to learn from Khan Academy, right? If they need to practice fractions or algebra, they can do that. But test questions should come from a real place. So ACT Academy appears to be written by the ACT, right? It is copyrighted by ACT, which means those questions are coming from ACT, which should mean it is a good source of real ACT questions. And ACT has fewer, like there are fewer released tests. There are only a few that you can locate that are officially released. So, so I would absolutely say ACT Academy is a great primary source for practicing. Absolutely. Read the Cracking the ACT book, then go and practice on ACT Academy for sure. Now, there's another question that Joanne, you asked about subject tests, right? So why don't I quickly address that? So subject tests, and Debbie will want to add in some thoughts after I say this, I think. But subject tests, so you need to look and see whether your college expects you to take subject tests. There is right now a little movement happening where some colleges that used to ask for them are stopping asking for them. There's a little debate happening right now about it. But you need to look on the college website and you need to pay attention to the language they use. Because if they say we require subject tests, then that means they require subject tests and you have to take them. If they say we recommend subject tests, that means they require subject tests and you should take them, right? Recommend means require, right? If a college recommends you do a thing and you don't do it, that means you are not demonstrating that you actually are interested in that college because other people did the recommended thing and you didn't do the recommended thing, right? So if they recommend it, you should try to do it, right? And so, of course, you might want to travel back in time and go take the world history test while you're in finishing up world history, because that's when you knew world history, right? You want to take it in June, right when you finish the thing, right? You want to take it right when you take the AP test. If you're taking an AP test in world history, you ought to take the subject test in world history. And that said, and this I mentioned in the previous one as well, especially for those of you that have juniors, but even now, if you're a senior and you're just starting your semester, if you are taking AP something, right, then whatever AP class it is, you should go purchase right now from Amazon Princeton Review's Cracking the Blank AP Test book. I'm completely shilling for Princeton Review's books, even though I don't work for them. That's because they are great. The AP and subject test cracking books are mostly really, really good. One or two of them are kind of a little dicey, but they're not going to hurt you, right? And the great thing about them is if you're taking an AP class and you get the AP book or the Cracking the AP Test book or Cracking the Subject Test book, it will have a chapter keyed to every chapter that you are learning, and it will summarize all the same things that were told to you in your textbook. And at the end of the chapter, it'll have this little bullet-pointed list of terms or something like that. And it'll say, okay, can you explain in 2 sentences what these 40 words mean? If you can do that, you are done with this chapter and move on to the next chapter, right? It is the greatest study resource during the school year for your actual class. It'll make the class easier. It'll make the tests easier. Then you get your A in the class. Then you go take the AP test, the subject test. That's it. Subject tests, you can take them 2 at a time on certain SAT dates. So you can either take the SAT or you can take 2 subject tests. Often people refer to them as something called SAT-2 subject tests, SAT with the Roman numeral 2, like 2, the letter I twice, right? SAT-2 just means subject tests. You should probably, like most colleges, what they require is like a science and a math, or a math and whatever you want, right? If you're going to be an engineer, probably math and science. If you're going to major in liberal arts, then probably maybe a math and something else, or maybe they don't care about math. It's completely individual to college. Pretty much it's only the top tier colleges that really care about this.
Yep.
It's if you're going to Ivies or, you know, really top-tier colleges. Just go look. It'll tell you if they recommend them. If they recommend them, take them. If it's too late now and you can't get it done, it's not going to kill anything, but it would help you. Like, if you're all done with everything and you've got a college and it says we recommend 2 subject tests, you haven't done it, yeah, register for the next date that has them, and take the most recent stuff you learned and go pretend you're taking that final again and relearn it. The cracking books will have a couple of practice tests in them. Take the practice test, see what score you get. They are scored on the 200 to 800 scale. And for those, generally, you know, if you're taking subject tests, you're probably applying to very high tier schools, which means you probably are going to have a transcript full of A's and you're going to have some 5s on AP tests. And just like you want a 5 on an AP test, you really, really need to get a 700 or higher on whatever subject test you take. If you get a 650 on a subject test, you probably would rather just not even send that in. That's the general idea. Or you should take it again or something like that. If you're sitting here right now and you've got a 670 on a subject test, you should go and retake that if you can and get the cracking book and take it and try to go get a 720 or something on it, you know, because otherwise you're probably doing yourself a disservice submitting a 670 or a 650 or something like that.
So, Bobby, do you want to tell us about the app that you created?
No, sure, thank you. I mean, this is just fun, but, you know, in the summer it gets kind of quiet in the tutoring world, and so I decided to teach myself how to design apps for iOS and Android, and I'm actually kind of in the middle of working on an update to it right now, but this is fun. You know, if you take a course from Princeton Review or Kaplan or other places, or even local places, they will often proctor tests on Saturday mornings that you can come to, and that's a really good thing to do, to go and have the experience of taking a proctored test on a Saturday morning with other students. When students work with me as a tutor, of course, they're halfway across the country, I can't provide that to them. And so I thought, well, gosh, my students, I'd like it if they could have the experience of a proctored test, even though I can't be there. But then I thought, okay, wait, this can actually be better than that. So I made this app, and it's called SAT Audio Proctor, and then also ACT Audio Proctor. And this app, you tell it which test you're taking, whether it's a full test, with essay, without essay, whatever, set it up. And then you basically press start, and you hear my voice, which is kind of funny, my voice saying, hello, I'm Bobby Hood, welcome to the SAT. This test has 5 sections. Please use a number 2 pencil. Okay, go ahead and begin. But one of the options is to, and this is, I actually hadn't thought about this. This is really a good idea, Debbie, for all of your users here, because I haven't had a way to really explain this to you. One of the options is you can have me speak like a boring proctor, like the exact real SAT proctor you can have, saying a bunch of boring stuff about number 2 pencils. You can choose a brief option where I just say, this, you know, it's section 2, begin, right? And that's all I say. But the third option is a strategy option. And what I have done is written down the like 5 or 6 most important strategy things I can think of for being mindful and careful on the test. And I recorded myself saying that. So it says, okay, this next section is section 3. It is the math non-calculator section. So you can't use a pencil here. Here's what I want you to do. On the word problems, I want you to take a deep breath. I want you to go to the end, figure out what the word problem is asking for, and then I want you to work methodically with your pencil, map it out, write it down step by step, right? I give all the strategy instructions, and then I say, okay, now it's time to begin the section. I want you to go to a happy place in your mind for a moment, take 3 deep breaths, and now go ahead and begin the section, right? And then I give a 5-minute warning.
It's like last-minute strategy prep, like right before they're
100%.
about to do it.
And for those students who are tutoring with me, it is a reminder of all the things I tell them during tutoring. But I'm telling you, you can go get this thing and proctor a couple of tests. You're going to get a little bit of really good strategy advice, you know, without having to spend $300 an hour to hire me as a tutor, you know. So that's certainly an option if you're proctoring tests at home. It's still very kind of like in its early stages. It's going to get a lot prettier over the next month. But right now it works, and it's not the prettiest app in the world, but it works, and it's kind of cool. So yeah, so that's that, right?
That's great.
I appreciate it. It's kind of a funny deal. I was looking. Oh, I can actually, I think, show what the app looks like, right?
Yeah.
It's like
There
select
it
your
is.
test.
It's a cute
and yeah, so that's pretty funny, right? Just a funny little thing.
Hello,
Yeah.
and welcome to this.
That's me
My
talking.
name is
Okay. So anyway, but that's it. Any other things we should talk about? Did I just lose the screen?
Okay, no, I'm here. We're here. I can hear you. I don't know what happened. Oops.
Did I do that?
Oh, wait, hold on.
I don't
Oh, you
think I
might
did.
have, Bobby.
I don't think I did.
You might have pressed the whiteboard.
Yeah, I don't know. Very strange. Let's see if I can.
That is strange. Okay,
Yeah,
hold on.
okay.
Wait, does that bring us back? That's weird. It brings us onto the side. Can you see us on the side?
I can't.
I can see us on the side, but yeah, that's.
Yeah.
How strange.
Okay.
Don't know.
Well,
that is very strange.
well, maybe, I mean, we're a little lucky that kind of happened towards the
Yeah.
end of the conversation. But we'll just see, does anybody have any questions that they want to type in the chat box?
Yeah, questions we can talk about. So Michelle, you mentioned test anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, yeah, let me talk for a moment about that. So basically, what you just heard me talking about briefly was a little bit of an idea about test anxiety, which is one way, the most important way to handle test anxiety is what I talked about earlier, which is take enough practice tests that you know exactly what your score is going to be, and you have a methodical way to approach everything. Step 2 is during the test it's sort of what I call the zen of taking tests, which is forget that the test exists and all you have in front of you is a page with some questions on it. And what you're doing is choosing to work, like you look at the questions in front of you and you look at the question and say, do I want to do this question right now? Or do I want to skip that question and do a different question, right? And so you just either choose to do it or choose to do a different one and keep choosing to do questions until there's 5 minutes left and bubble in what you've got, right? And keep choosing to do questions. And then when that section ends, stop, close your eyes, take a deep breath, go to a happy place for a minute. Like 3 deep breaths is the best anxiety reducer there is. Take 3 deep breaths and then go on to the next thing, right? That's basically it, I think, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I don't know that there's a lot more complexity to it than that.
Yeah. So, again, I don't know if anybody has any other questions. This was just like a great session to give people some ideas to think about related to whether or not their students should continue to try and take the exams one more time, particularly if you're a rising senior and want to hit some particular score that you're trying to get because you want to either get into a particular school, or for a lot of people it's because you want to potentially try and get more merit scholarship money. Michelle, do you want to mention, like, sometimes that you push a lot of the kids, particularly in Florida, because they're so close to some of the test requirements to get money,
Yes.
particular
So, let me see here. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you could hear me. So in Florida, we have Bright Futures. So I really, even the second tier Bright Futures, which is a 26 on the ACT or a 1170 on the SAT. And those scores we have until May. So here's what I talk about with scores, and this is true for all students. For admissions, there is a certain deadline and you need to have your test done certainly as soon as possible, maybe the first round here. Before admissions. But for Merit Scholarship and for Bright Futures in Florida and for some other things, you can always go back. So let's say in March you want to take the test one more time. You're certainly too late from an admission standpoint, so don't hear that Michelle said we could wait till March to apply to colleges and take that test. But what I'm saying is, if you took a test in March and you got the scores back and they were higher, you can go back to the school and say, I know that there's a merit aid that I missed because I had a 28 on the the ACT, and now I have a 30, and I qualify for the next tier of merit aid. If you go and talk to the school, 9 times out of 10, they will actually bump you into that category. So it's never too late to take it. And again, in Florida with Bright Futures, we have until May. So I'm a big believer in, I've got an online system that gives a lot of practice, that we have practice tests on there. Let's at least get to the second tier. So that's what I would say. Whether it's for merit aid, we have more time than we do for admissions. Does that make sense?
Yep, definitely does. Okay. Well,
okay.
So we can hear some feedback.
Yeah, I don't know who it is that turned on this whiteboard thing. Whoever has the whiteboard setting on, I think it must be, I can't see where it comes from, but I don't have an option, anything about it. So
yeah.
Somebody turn that on. I don't know who it is.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the first time we've used this platform. Yeah. I think it can work well. We have to learn a little bit about the settings, and maybe, and maybe there's some setting that we need to find out where it is that only certain people can turn things on. But I think until this point, it was pretty good. So I think we got through most of what was worthwhile information. So thank you so much, Bobby. I mean, I hope people, I know that they walked away with good information. I'm always impressed listening to you, because what I find so helpful is that you really need to approach these tests in both kind of knowing your foundational kind of, academic stuff, but then you have to layer it with strategy. And I think people don't understand that strategy piece. You could be a really smart kid, but if you don't have the strategy piece, you're not going to perform as well as you probably can.
Oh, 100%. I think that is a quick little side note just right there for you to wrap up from what you just said. In my experience, if you take the very top, very highest achieving students that you run into ever, those students on average, if they take the SAT or the ACT, they score about a 680 on each side of the SAT and get about a 13 something, right? And maybe a 12 something, and they score about a 28 or a 29 on the ACT. And mostly they can only get into the 30s or the 1400s and above with some sort of test prep or tutoring. But of course, there are students who go beyond that naturally, right? But that's on average what the high performer students. So if you have a student who are like, oh, scored like 1300 cold or something like that, then that means you're capable of going higher. And if you feel like your score just doesn't match, that's the thing to think about. It's not a failing on the part of the student. The tests are designed so that you cannot get beyond those scores without knowing some test prep, without knowing some patterns. That's just how it works. Okay, anyway, so back to you, Deb.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting information. And the thing, I kind of sometimes like to equate what we're talking about to life in general. And I think that, this idea of kind of somehow, understanding the system or understanding the strategy applies across the board to lots of things in life, not just test prep. So that's the lesson I think that kids can kind of walk away with if they approach, test prep the way you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Right. Just keep in mind that it's all about strategy. And from a test anxiety standpoint, just really, think about the strategies. I'll send a follow-up email after this to everybody that was on the call today, outlining some of the strategies that Bobby talked about. But I think sometimes we stress ourselves out because we say things like, and I think Debbie, you said this, I don't know all the science facts, or I'm not good in science. Well, as Bobby pointed out, those science questions the answers are there. Treat it like a reading section. But if you go into the test thinking, I don't know science, oh my gosh, there's a big word I don't understand,
right.
And then we've totally freaked ourselves out.
Yeah, your grades in science have nothing to do whatsoever with how you're going to score on the science section of the ACT. Grades in English maybe would be much more predictive.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, don't worry about content knowledge. As long as you know algebra and geometry, you know all the and basic grammar rules. You know everything you need to know to take the test.
And I think one other thing I would emphasize is that the things that you're saying, Bobby, don't come from an average tutor, because it comes from somebody who has really studied the process. Like, you know that test from a different, vantage point than just, somebody who, has done well and decides that they want to help other people because they did well. I mean, you know it almost.
Oh, sure. Oh, 100%. Right. Because that's the whole thing behind all this is if you just find a smart kid who did well on the test and say, tell me how to do well on the test, they can't do that, right? The skill set of doing well on the test is very different from the skill set of explaining how to do well on the test, right? So that's why, I mean, the tutoring thing is different. And most tutors also, the people who are just young people who are just following a framework given to them by a company, but they haven't studied the actual how the tests look, right? I'm coming at this from, I've looked at a bunch of the tests, this is how they work, right? And so here are some strategies that work really well from Princeton Review or Kaplan or whoever. Here's some strategies that I just came up with myself, but they work because they're the patterns of the test. That's it. So, well, I sure appreciate your time today. This is wonderful as usual, Debbie. It's great. People can you can email me. There's a contact form on my website. Email me anytime. Michelle and Christina, it was great to get to meet you. Any other things we can, and Joanne, any other things we can talk about?
I think we're pretty good. Yep. Paige says thanks very much. I mean, we covered a lot in an hour, and next time if we do this, we'll figure out the whiteboard and how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.